This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
Police in Las Vegas found themselves in the middle of a UFO mystery last month after
To us, big eyes. They have big eyes.
911, what are you reporting?
We got someone or something crawling around out here.
Did you see what it was? Was it a person or an animal?
One of my partners said they saw something fall out of the sky too, so that's why I'm kind of curious.
What sign? I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Okay, hang on.
He's right.
Is he in your yard, sir?
Yeah, good. He's big.
Okay, what's he doing in your yard?
Mythical Legends Podcast with your host Daniel Barnett.
And we're back on the Mythical Legends Podcast, and we can't wait to get this podcast going. I'm back with my good buddy, Chris Allsford. How are you, buddy?
Not bad, mate. How are you?
I am very, very well. Busy as normal, but well, and I'm sure you're the same.
Beautiful hotel room. Not much of a view. I won't share it with you.
How has things been, mate?
Good, yeah, very good. Thanks. Yeah.
Cool, mate. Amazing. Well, we have a fantastic podcast lined up for you today. As always, we have our fun fact of the week, which I will pass over to Chris Allsford in a minute, and then we have a fantastic guest that I've been trying to get on the podcast for a while now, and I can't wait to talk to him today. I know that Chris has some amazing questions for him as well, and then we'll have our podcast of the week later in the episode. So today we have a fantastic lineup for you. So without further ado, I'll pass it to Chris Allsford for the fun fact of the week.
Okay. So in our research, in the books we read, the things we look at in our little world, people are often talking about finding three-toed footprints in the United States and in Canada and a fair number of other places as well. And often people are wondering where these things are coming from. So I'm just going to draw your attention to the Burren Jaw. It's Australia on the east coast, which not everybody knows is tropical rainforest. And it's essentially a little bit smaller than in the movies, but a T-Rex running around, taking cows, goats, kangaroos, and it lives on them and leaving big footprints. And it's nicknamed by the Aboriginal people is Old Three Toes.
Fantastic. And so that is a story that I came across a couple of weeks ago. I was watching Expedition Bigfoot and they found a three-toed print.
Yeah.
I think we've even found one at Anfield at some point. But that's really, really interesting to kind of hear.
Yeah, it's funny how these things spread out across the globe and they've got such similar descriptions. It's not the only giant lizard that's in Australia either. There's another one which is for another time.
Oh, that's cool, mate. That's cool. Keep it in the bank. Right, okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we have a fantastic guest to bring to you today. He is being part of Small Town Monsters. I first came across his name, I think it was about a year and a half ago, and I have been watching some of his amazing things over the past year. I can see he's now smiling in the backstage. So let's bring him on stage now, Mr. Aaron Deese.
Hey guys, how are you?
Mate.
Hey Aaron, how you doing?
Good to be here.
That is
thank you.
Awesome background, mate. Awesome background.
Isn't it?
Oh,
Yeah.
Thank you. These are a number of artworks by various friends of mine. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Nice. So I will kick off this podcast then and start with. So, how did you get involved with Small Town Monsters?
Yeah, it was kind of serendipitous, man. I had been doing my own podcast for a year or so with my wife called Hey Strangeness, which is technically still ongoing. It gets a couple updates a year. It's out there. And I had met the STM crew at a couple of events and kind of interacted with them online. So I was a big fan of the movies. Like I loved STM documentaries. So getting to know them was super cool. And they reached out and they're like, "Hey, do you want to maybe write a book with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd love to do that." Literally wanted to do book writing my entire life. Let's do this thing. So I worked with them as a collaborator for about a year, and then I joined the crew at the end of 2023 now, I guess it's been. So yeah, now I work with them full time doing writing and story production, research and social media, a bunch of fun stuff like that. Yeah.
Wow. And so we have spoken to Alex, Alexander Panikov. I think we did about a year ago, didn't we, Chris?
Yeah, yeah.
Then
Middle of last year, I think.
Oh, he's great, man. Yeah, good buddy of mine.
We got another one lined up as well, which is fantastic. Heather.
Oh, yes. I talk to Heather literally every day. Yes. Heather's my partner in crime over there. Mm-hmm.
Well, I will pass the torch to you, Mr. Allsford.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Barnett. Texas. So it's not an area you would normally associate with cryptids when you, in the normal sense of the word, if there's such a thing as that.
Right. That's good.
Yeah. What, tell us a little bit about what got you into it in Texas. Was there something happened there?
Yeah, absolutely. So on the surface, when you hear Bigfoot, you hear Dogman, even UFOs, you don't immediately think of Texas. You're absolutely right. I'm really glad you asked this question. When you start getting in the weeds, though, there are a lot of high-profile cases that are talked about worldwide that are centered in Texas. For UFOs, we have the Cash Landrum UFO incident. We have the Phoenix, or not Phoenix, sorry. We have the Aurora crash, the Aurora UFO crash, a favorite of mine. Those are two pretty big ones. In the Bigfoot world, we've got cases all over the map, and we even have annual conventions in Texas, like the Jefferson Bigfoot Festival. And it kind of seems to be a thing where the further north you get, the closer you get to Arkansas and Oklahoma, that's where you start seeing more activity. But even central southwest Texas, and even some of the more desertous regions, if you want to call them that, have a wealth of Bigfoot sightings, both in the modern day and going back historically. So for me, getting into Dogman in Texas specifically, because that's kind of my specialty in air quotes, if you want to call it that. I was just looking into stuff that was local to my area because I'm like, hey, I'd like to look into things that I can maybe drive to and go check out this sighting location. And totally by luck, by chance, I had a relative relay a sighting to me that when you break it down piece by piece, it basically sounds like your atypical roadside Dogman sighting. And so that got me looking into other sightings in the area to see if there were any. Turns out there were, and it kind of just grew from there. So it happened really organically. It started with one case and it just kind of blossomed.
Nice.
Wow. So I've had the pleasure of visiting Dallas. And we met Lyle Blackburn.
Oh yes,
and that was fantastic. And say I heard some good Dogman stories from him, which was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So to kind of lead on from that, then, so you said that kind of Dogman is your specialty. So what cryptid have you investigated the most, and which one are you most interested and had the most experiences with?
Oh, that's a great question. Dogman is the one I've spent the most time on, having written 2 books on it and participated in 2 documentaries on it, just kind of inevitably, I've spent a lot of time with Bigfoot, one, because he's here in my little studio area, but 2, just that's a main thing that we focus on over at Small Town Monsters. Our audience is very passionate about it. The community is obviously very passionate about it, and there's a lot to it. If I'm going to be totally honest, on paper, I think Bigfoot is probably the cryptid we have the best chance of proving that it exists, or at least making a case for its existence based on empirical evidence. And that's something that's really been a focus for me lately. I have another book coming out this year that is not about Dogman, I'll say that. So I've spent a lot of time looking into more Sasquatch stuff. So I've spent a lot of time with that guy, figuratively speaking. And Mothman is kind of the one that got me into all this when I was probably about your age, Daniel. I bought a copy of the Mothman Prophecies, and it literally changed the way I saw the world. I was like, even if half the stories in this book are fake, okay, let's just assume half these people are making this up for some reason. I don't know why, but that still changes everything we know about science and the fabric of the universe, if even one of these stories is true. You know what I mean? And that stuck with me these last, gosh, I guess 20 some years at this point. Just that idea that the world can be stranger than we think it is.
So, as you bring up Dogman and Bigfoot, then, so have you ever had an experience or encounter with either Bigfoot or Dogman?
Good question. Me personally, no. I have friends and family who have. I have people who have stayed off the record to this day, remain anonymous, who have had pretty inexplicable experiences. But me personally, no, I haven't. And some days I think I'd like to. I think it'd be cool to have that final piece of the puzzle, at least experience it, and understand what these witnesses are going through on some level. And then part of me is like, as long as I don't have that, I get to stay skeptical. I'm no longer going to have that luxury if I see something. So
yeah, and that's something that, say, when I began podcasting, I think that was about 2 years ago now. I was asked that same question, and it's only recently that I have actually been able to answer that question. Because I kept thinking in my head, do I want to have an experience and know that this thing is real? Or do I go, it could be, anything could be real? And kind of, I can say that either way, I was kind of delighted. Either way, let's say. So, Chris, I will turn it back to you, mate.
Oh, gee, thanks on that. Back to Dogman, briefly. You identified the Dogman Triangle in Texas, because we know so little about it, we think we all grew up watching Dallas. So, can you describe the terrain in your triangle? I've had a little look on Google Earth, but people listening probably haven't.
Yeah, happily. And that's one thing that's really compelling about this whole idea of a Dogman Triangle, which I will say from the outset, it's entirely possible as time goes by, we get more reports, that triangle could become a rhombus or a trapezoid or something else. But it's the way Texas is laying out. You have several very, very large metropolitan cities, some of the biggest cities in the continental United States. I think 2 or 3 of the top 10 are in Texas. And then you have vast stretches of what is essentially plains, prairies, scrubland, but there's also a lot of forests. There are a lot of rivers. There are a lot of canyon areas. There are a lot of swampy areas. We even have coastal regions, of course, in Texas. So pretty much any biome you can think of, other than a very, very deep, perpetual winter like you get in some parts of Canada, Alaska, so on and so forth. We don't get that out here. Our animals can't deal with that. Other than that, pretty much every kind of environment you can think of is represented in Texas. So you have these big cities, and then you have small towns that are around them, and then you have big stretches of unoccupied space in the middle. And some of those are ranch and farmlands. Some of them are national forests, national parks, state parks and forests. Some of them are nature preserves. Some of them are just private land that the residents don't want anybody showing up on. So there's a lot of space where theoretically something can hide out if it wants to, but then you do have population centers adjacent to these wild spaces, so you can have these sightings. The Dogman Triangle runs from Dallas to San Antonio to Houston and then all the way back up again. And for anyone listening who's not familiar with Texas geography, that's a big old triangle right in the middle of the state, which is, you can kind of see it on this poster behind me here. I didn't plan for that. It just happens to be there. So it makes sense logically that if these things are going to be sited, they're going to be sited in a central area where there are population centers, but where there are also places where they can theoretically hide out, assuming that they need places to hide out, So that's essentially what the Dogman Triangle in Texas is, but we have sightings from outside of that. We have the Amarillo Dogman, which was pretty popular a couple years ago. Jury's still out on what that was. Probably a coyote, but still, we don't know. We have sightings out in Abilene. We have sightings going way, way out towards the border with other states. We also have sightings down along the Mexican border. So they're all over the place. We just seem to have a concentration kind of right in the middle.
And say, so, because we've spoken about Texas a lot, what is the most common cryptid you would find in Texas?
I would say at this point in time, based on what we know, Bigfoot. If you go to the BFRO database, you look at the writings of Mr. Blackburn, Ken Gerhard, Nick Redfern, Bigfoot is the one that we have the most documentation on, for sure. But personally, I ask the question, is that due to the fact that Dogman hasn't really been a part of the mainline discussion until recently? Is that based on the fact that there are just more Bigfoot than there are Dogman? I don't know the answer to either of those questions, but I do think we're seeing more of an interest, and more witnesses are coming forward. I received 2 emails actually this week from witnesses who I'd never spoken with before, who had sightings in Texas. So short answer, right now, Bigfoot. 10 years from now, man, who knows? I don't think anything's off the table.
Yeah. Wow. And say, Mike, go on.
So do you see a connection or collaboration between Bigfoot and Dogman, or are they separate, like in competition with each other for food sources? Or?
That's something that's speculated after a lot, and we do have some areas where we hear of Dogman and Bigfoot sightings taking place in very close proximity. I can point to my friend Mr. Martin Groves, who witnessed these creatures at the same time in the same place. But my take on that is that we just don't know at this point. There's a lot of conjecture over what Dogman is, and reports kind of seem to run down the middle, where some of them are very strange and the other half of them are more seeming just like an unidentified animal. I think the general consensus amongst large swaths of the community is that Bigfoot is probably an unclassified animal. So how those things would interact with each other theoretically is beyond me at this point. But the short answer is that we do hear anecdotes of them being seen in the same place at the same time. I don't know what that means, though. I couldn't tell you.
No, you did, like in recognized science, you will see that 2 alpha predators, that they will, people have, what would happen if a bear and a gorilla had a fight, but the truth is they wouldn't, because they're both apex predators and they would actually walk around each other unless they were protecting their young or something like that. So you could well have the same thing with a Dogman and a Bigfoot, where they grudgingly walk past each other but don't actually, because if you get injured in the natural world, you're dead.
Exactly. I'm really glad you say that, because I was talking to someone on another show about this recently, and we have to assume if they're both natural animals, they know where they fit in their ecological niche. That's just how animals work. They know their place. Unless they're removed from their native environment and they become a native species, then that throws everything off. But if we're assuming they're both animals and that they're in the place they're supposed to be, they know to leave each other alone. They know not to disrupt that ecology. I'm really glad you said that.
So, okay then. So, this is very rare that we have Dogman on the podcast, and I spoke to Chris about this before kind of we came on. So, in your opinion, then, what are the characteristics for Dogman? Because people have done a lot of research, aka Jeff Meldrum, into Bigfoot and what Bigfoot could look like and the characteristics of Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. So, would you be able to try and describe that for Dogman?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm nowhere near on the level of the names you just mentioned. Obviously, hats off to those guys. But what we see in pretty much every encounter is the standing upright bipedal locomotion. If we don't have that, 99% chance we're going to identify this as a large dog, as a wolf, as, a German Shepherd, something like that. And let's break it down logically. Most likely that's what it is. Most likely if we see a strange dog, it's a strange dog. Okay. But when we run into over and over and over and over again, witnesses describing these things as either when they first see it, it's on 2 legs, or when they see it, it's on 4 legs and then it stands up and walks away. When that's the pattern that we're operating from, just a strange dog for me doesn't work anymore. So that we have in almost every encounter. The most common physical descriptors are the elongated snout, pointed ears, overall face and head structure reminiscent of a German Shepherd, Belgian Malinois. Sometimes you hear the breed Grand Pyrenees mentioned, a wolf, but every once in a while we hear like, oh, it looked like a bull mastiff. It looked like some kind of a Rottweiler. Sometimes we even hear that the folded ears are in play, like with Rottweilers. Personally, I've never taken a report that mentions that, but I have seen them. And then from there, we kind of get into the split. Half the reports we've got strange supernatural seeming stuff like glowing red eyes, a feeling of like, malevolence, something that is unkind, a feeling of fear, something you want to get away from. And then on the other half of the spectrum, we have people who are like, yeah, it just looked like a really weird dog. It was strange. I didn't want to get any closer to it, but they don't walk away feeling like they've encountered something from beyond the veil, to put it a certain way. So those are the most common features, but we get into some different stuff too. You'll hear different coat colors mentioned occasionally. Generally, they're blackish, gray, or brown. I've heard the white ones mentioned every now and again. Sometimes they have tails, but more often than not, the tail doesn't seem to come up in those descriptions, at least, again, in the reports I've looked at.
So, I would be fixated on his teeth. That's for sure.
Teeth are mentioned quite a bit. Yeah.
I wouldn't be looking at his tail.
So it's kind of what you've just described, Aaron, is because I've done a lot into Bigfoot, and we've spoken to so many witnesses and scientists and researchers about Bigfoot, and what you've just described is very similar.
Mm-hmm.
So the question I'm going to ask now is, do you think sometimes people mistake Bigfoot and Dogman sightings? Vice versa?
Yeah, absolutely. That's another great question. I think it's inevitable. I think we have to assume that they are, because we don't know conclusively what either of these things are. Again, assuming they exist, we don't know what either of them are. We don't know if they fit into our natural ecosystem, if they're something that's come from the outside. We don't know if they're from outer space. Personally, I'm not a proponent of that theory, but we don't have any certainties that we can start with as a baseline. So if we're just getting fleeting glimpses, nighttime sightings, witnesses who are not prepared to interact with these things, they very often come away startled and rattled. If there are two upright, hairy creatures lurking in the same territories in different parts of the world, I think it's inevitable that people will mistake one for the other. On the opposite end of the spectrum, though, I think we have enough sightings in both categories that are containing clear descriptions from credible witnesses who were of sound mind to still make a distinction and say, there are two separate things going on here. That's my belief. That's my theory. There are many in the Bigfoot world who disagree with me. Totally cool. But that's where I stand on it. Yeah.
Wow. And say that's where, go on, Chris.
But I'm just going to ask, so over to you, right, there is the Rougarou, which is, but that's actually believed to be a shapeshifter.
The Rougarou is a totally different thing. If we're talking about Dogman as a biological entity, the Rougarou fits more closely in with what we maybe think of as a fictional werewolf. And personally, I use the terms Dogman and werewolf interchangeably in my books and when I'm having these conversations, just because that's the language that witnesses tend to use, and I like to remain consistent with that, but that's just me. But the Rougarou is very much more of a spiritual thing. It has ties to Catholic beliefs. It has ties to other spiritual traditions. Yeah, it's not thought of traditionally as just an animal. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I gotta say, I want to continue this conversation, but first, and I have to apologize. I'm going to show an advert. All right. And after I will apologize, and you'll get why. Okay, guys, we will see you after the break.
For half an hour on Saturday afternoons and for a quarter of an hour on Wednesday evenings, the world's only show about hard science, weird shit, and surreality. And it's co-presented by an anthropomorphic chicken. Be there or be square.
That was one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
I'm very sorry, Aaron. I'm very sorry.
I love that.
To every guest. say John is a very, very good friend of mine, and John is runs the Center of Fortean Zoology, and he's well, there you go. I
No, man, I am a big fan of the Center for Fortean Zoology. I have several of their books, and that was amazing. I grew up on the first wave of Adult Swim cartoons in the U.S., for anyone who knows that reference. So that was wonderful. I loved it. No joke.
So going back to what we were talking about then. So many witnesses have witnessed Dogman, as you've said, and so many witnesses have said that they've seen Bigfoot. Now, on a couple of the podcasts, we always say when we come off of it, what does that person gain from telling us that story and lying to us? And this is what, before my dad didn't believe in Bigfoot, he said, well, what does this person have to gain? They actually have a lot to lose by telling us. So what would your opinion be on people that try and hoax these stories on podcasts? What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, you make such a good point, because this is something I've written about in my books. Like, once you've told somebody, I saw a UFO, I saw Bigfoot, I saw what looked like a werewolf, for goodness sake, there's no going back. You can't put that out there and then delete it. So life and social media do not work the same way. I mean, they kind of do, but they also don't. So like, once you've crossed that line, you live there now. And when we're talking about UFOs, we're talking about Bigfoot, those are at least things that, like, okay, yeah, I know people see UFOs. I know people think they see Bigfoot. Oh, yeah, my uncle said he saw Bigfoot once. None of us really believe him, but yeah, whatever. It's different with Dogman. It's very, very different. So, yeah, you really have to ask, what is the incentive? If we're to assume that anyone is lying about this, why? Because you guys know this is not cryptocurrency. We're not buying private islands researching cryptozoology. You know what I mean? Two very different cryptos, okay? You run Google searches for them. Sometimes they come up together. Very different things. So yeah, there's not like a huge payday if you go on record and say, I saw a werewolf. That's just not how this works, folks. Sorry to disillusion anybody, but that's not how this works. So in my mind, 99% of the time, okay, yeah, let's assume some people are just doing this for kicks. They want to cut their teeth on creative writing, so they're going to create a fake eyewitness testimony, or they want to break into acting, so they try to get into a documentary. You hear stories about things like that. I personally can't think of any examples that I know of, but you hear stories about things like that. But I think most of the time people have genuinely experienced something and they need to get it off their chest. You need a place to sometimes just vent and unload these things. And in a lot of cases, share it in a way that other people can see it and identify with it. And I've had a few people, I'm not going to say so many people, but I've had a few people that after I had the chance to interview them, they said, I thought I was the only person that had ever seen something like this. And now I know that I'm not. And to me, that's the importance. That's why we do this, because people need that. That's essential. We need to give people a place to know that they're not insane. And if they are insane, they're insane along with a whole lot of other people. I hope that answers your question.
yeah, totally. Over to you, Chris.
I wanted to add to that. So I work in a very male-dominated industry on power lines. And of course, I talk to my work colleagues and what I'm doing here. And then you get, hey, do you know about UFOs? I literally know nothing about UFOs, but why? What do you want to tell me? And all of a sudden, this big butch, tough guy that normally pretty quiet is opening up about a UFO experience he had. But the last thing he says is, don't tell anyone. Okay, buddy. Okay.
And those stories are the most impactful when you have someone who wants to remain anonymous. At least having had that interaction, that's a genuine experience. Unless they just personally want to pull one over on you, which again, when it's your friends and family, I just
it's not likely.
Yeah.
And that is where it becomes the point of when they just come up to you and say this, and they probably feel like we're like bad, and we're saying, oh well, we believe in Bigfoot, and say, here in the UK, you walk down one of our streets and you say, I believe in Bigfoot, good chance you get punched. Good chance. So I know that a lot of you in the US have now gone by kind of state. You've got used to it. So people now know the word Bigfoot. They know the word cryptid. They know the word Dogman.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really important. So kind of it slides on really nicely now to Small Town Monsters then. So going to the work that you've done over the past couple of years. So could you name a couple of the documentaries that you've done and your experiences on them?
Yeah, definitely. The first that I was involved in, the first time I was ever on film for anything was the Dogman Triangle, Werewolves in the Lone Star State, which was a film, not adaptation so much as a companion to the book, Texas Dogman Triangle. And that was super cool. The whole crew came down here to Texas and we drove around together. We spent most of it in the car driving between major cities, but beyond that, it was super cool. It was a lot of fun. We followed that up with the book was Hunting Grounds, Dogmen of the Lakes, and the documentary was Dogman Territory, Werewolves in the Land Between the Lakes. And then I co-directed and co-wrote and was on the panel for UFOs Revisited, which will be showing up on some new streaming platforms soon. And that was kind of a roundtable discussion about different UFO cases with a panel of different people. A lot of fun. That was a lot of fun. And then I've worked in the background on different projects, Sasquatch Unearthed, Buckeye Bigfoot, Bigfoot Archives, which is airing right now. Both of those are airing right now. A lot of the YouTube stuff that's coming up over the next few months, I'm getting the opportunity to work on in the background. And then I do social media stuff. So if you follow us on any of our social media platforms and you see us posting things, that's me. I do that. Until recently, I was hosting our weekly live streams for STM Live. We've scaled those back a little bit. We're doing those like once a month now. And then I also run our podcast network, which is currently airing The Lore You Know and Monsteropolis. So that's the resume in a nutshell.
Over to you, Mr. Allsford.
No, so I'm going to send you a friend request if you're the social media
please.
guy, right?
Oh yeah, please.
Yeah, it's and I hadn't heard of Monsteropolis. That's one I've missed. So
yeah, that's Seth Breedlove, Mark Matsky, and Heather Mosier host that show. I show up occasionally as a guest host if someone is unavailable, but yeah, that's a fun one.
Okay, it's going to be added to my watch list. That's for sure.
Yes, thank you.
I think your watch list is just getting bigger. That's going to go out the screen, Chris.
Yeah, Daniel, I've known you for about 2 years, 3 years, 2.5 years, and my watch list is now about 8 years behind.
If I stop then, he does not regret it. So, Aaron, the final topic that I'll kind of come around to. So, you mentioned that you've done a lot of books. Would you like to tell everyone a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I've only written 2. I'm not quite to Nick Redfern level yet, but maybe someday. Shoot for the stars, right? But the first was the Texas Dogman Triangle, which is exactly what it sounds like, exactly what we've been discussing. And then the second was Hunting Grounds, Dogmen of the Lakes. And that focused... It's kind of a sequel to the Dogman Triangle book in that it builds from some of the same themes and it does reference, what I guess encountered. I hate to say uncovered, but encountered when I was researching the first book. So it's built from that, but it focuses on the Dogman phenomenon in Tennessee and Kentucky, with a particular focus on the land between the lakes. And there's an old... I don't know how old you'd call it, but the LBL massacre, you may have heard that term thrown around online. It's an urban legend, essentially, about a dogman attack that's supposed to have taken place in the 80s. And my question was, okay, yeah, is this story true? That's something I'd like to know. But beyond that, I'd like to know if this phenomenon has legitimacy in this area, just beyond 1 or 2 high-profile stories. So that's what that book is about. And then the third one is coming out later this year. We've not publicly announced it yet, but it is cryptozoology based and not about Dogman. I'll say that. So,
okay.
Amazing. So, John, tell people where people can buy those books.
Yeah, they're available on Amazon. They are cheaper if you go to the Small Town Monsters store, smalltownmonsters.com/shop. Asterisks there if you're listening outside of the US. I'm not sure about shipping rates, so but Amazon and the Small Town Monsters shop are going to be the places to find them. Yeah.
Wow. Well, Aaron, is there anything else that you would like to mention on this podcast?
Man, that's That's everything I've got. If I think, I mean, definitely follow Small Town Monsters on YouTube. We have 2 releases coming out every week, full-length documentaries, an hour long or more, very heavily focused on Bigfoot, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners are very passionate about. And then we did just wrap up our 2025 Kickstarter campaign, but you can join as a late backer until April 1st. So if anyone was interested in getting any of the rewards associated with that campaign, they are still available till April 1st. But beyond that, man, just thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to talking with you guys.
It's gone by too fast, man. You're gonna have to come back for
always does. Yeah, please, anytime. I'd love to.
Say
episode 2.
Say I will contact you very, very soon because there's possibly something I would like you to get involved with.
Yeah, please.
Right? Yeah,
please, man. Love to hear from you. Yeah.
So to everyone out there, we are now going to move on to our podcast of the week. Thanks so much, Aaron, and we will speak to you very, very, very soon. And our podcast of the week is Beyond Bigfoot and Beyond with Cliff and Bobo. This is by Cliff Backman and James Bobo Fay, a very, very good friend of mine and Chris's. And I thank Bobo so much for joining us out in the Pacific Northwest. And that's a bit of too much of a clue for you there. Chris, how did you find that podcast, mate?
One of my favourites.
Yeah.
I'm not belittling anybody else. Just I really enjoyed it.
And say I think that was very different to how we normally run podcasts, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
And say that's it's a different topic that we don't really know much about. Well, I don't know about you, but with
not much.
So yeah, but that was fantastic. So to everyone out there, to wrap up this podcast, I thank you so much, Aaron Deese, for coming on, and we will definitely put all of Aaron's links in the description. If you would like to listen more to the Mythical Legends podcast, then subscribe and like to our YouTube. And if you would like to listen to this whilst you're on a dog walk or in a car, we are also streaming on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, and lots more. And if you would like to visit our website, that is at mythicallegends.co.uk. And don't forget, the Mythical Legends team will be running the Cryptic Conference UK on May 30th, 31st, and 1st of June. And Chris cannot wait for that. I tell you that right now. And it should be a massive success. So to everyone out there, I have some final words for you. Oh, Chris, is there anything else that you would like to say on this podcast, mate?
Go on.
No. Keep searching, stay mythical, and most importantly, stay safe out there, guys. Here comes the outro.